can we have as item 1 to approve a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June 2025, pages 7 to 9. Are we all in agreement, or is there anything to say? Yeah? Everything okay? Yeah?
Moving those, Chair.
Moving those, yes, okay.
Seconder.
Any seconder? Councillor Hughes, yeah. Okay. All in favour? Thank you very much. Yeah, done. Item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Well, I've got apologies for Councillor Ron McCrossan and apologies for Helen Greensmith. I don't think there's any substitutions, is there? So, everybody else present and correct? Thank you very much. Item 3, declaration of interest. Anybody? No? No? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the draft for the annual government statement and unaudited statement of accounts 2024-25 covering report. Just to note, and I'll pass it over to Tina. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Today we are bringing you the draft annual governance statement, which you will find at Appendix 1 of the report. And what we are asking for is the Audit Committee note the annual governance statement and any comments that you have for them to us for inclusion in the final version that will be presented to the Audit Committee late in the financial year. The second part of this report is the unaudited statement of accounts, which has been published on the Council's website at the end of June. Again, these are just for noting at this point, and we will be bringing them to you either later in the year or early in the new year for final approval by the Audit Committee. In terms of the annual governance statement, this is the same as it's kind of like come to you previous formats, previous years. It sets out the internal controls for the council and sets out the governance framework, the governance arrangements and an annual review of the internal controls and systems, including its financial management. Section 6.4 sets out the assurance from both the internal and external auditors. The external auditors will usually comment on the value for money arrangements. This is not yet included yet because that work is not yet concluded, but it will be in the final report. The internal audit have provided a moderate assurance over internal controls for the year 24-25. So, as I say, we was hoping to present the annual governance statement in December. However, it might now be early in the new year. That will depend upon when the external audit opinion comes through. I'm happy to take any questions on that if anybody has any.
Councillor Hughes. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. On page 24, just relating back to the fraud that took place, do we have any indication of how the claims are proceeding, and do we have any idea what proportion of the 600k that's outstanding that we might be able to recoup? Okay,
so we've had some initial conversations, or some recent conversations, should I say, with our insurers. We are waiting that they have offered an amount that we don't think is sufficient. So we are in negotiations with them at the moment on that. What we get from the insurance company will be dependent upon the crime of proceeds order that the police will take against the Alan Doig who committed the fraud. That was supposed to be heard in January. It was delayed, and we're still trying to get an updated date from the police when that will happen. So there's no update on that at the moment. Any money that we do receive from the insurance company, if we get a proceeds of crime order, so for example, if they go after the gambling companies and get some restitution from the gambling companies, then what the insurance usually do is claim back anything that they've overpaid, so that we're not in a better position. So at the moment, I don't know whether we're going to be in a better or worse position, because we just haven't heard from the police yet, unfortunately. But we will keep you updated through Audit Committee as soon as we do hear anything.
Thank you very much. Councillor Strong, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 21, paragraph 6.4, the bit in italics when it says the year ended 31st of March, it says overall we provide moderate assurance. Now, in the overall scheme of things, is moderate good?
Sorry, I'm going to pass you on to Max. Max can probably describe that better than I can, if that's okay, Max.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So our internal audit assurance scale ranges from no assurance, which is the lowest we can offer. That is, we can't give any assurance over controls. The highest is substantial. You've then got 2 in the middle, limited and moderate. So it's the third in that scale of 4 at the positive end. If I reflect across my client base of public sector and local authority organisations, the majority sit in that group of moderate assurance. Very few fall into limited, very few fall into substantial, almost none tend to fall into no assurance. So within that scale, hopefully it gives you a sense of where you are, but broadly in line with our local authorities is the answer to the question.
Any more questions? No? No? That's it. Thank you very much, Tina. Now go to item 5, which is the External Audit Progress Report 2024-2025, a report of the Chief Finance and Section 151 Officer. I'll pass this to Tina first, but then it's going to Mark Surridge of Mazars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. As you all know, that there is a requirement that councils have their annual statements of accounts audited on an annual basis, and in addition to the auditors will undertake works necessary to support their conclusion on value for money as well. So due to the fraud that was identified in July 2022 and the government's statutory backstop arrangements, the Council's external auditors issued disclaimed opinions for the statements of accounts for the years 21-22, 22-23 and 23-24. So this, the audit that is currently being undertaken relates to the set of accounts for 24-25. So I will pass you over to Mark, who will go through the progress of the external audit. But one thing that the report does say that what you'll notice as part of the position that the likelihood for the council to get an unqualified opinion on its statement of accounts prior to local government reorganisation is quite unlikely now, unfortunately. And Mark will explain through his progress report why that position is occurring. Thank you. Could I pass on to you, Mark?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go backwards in this report because there's one piece that is worth having first, and then we get into the real meat of it. The first beat that I talk about is in terms of the 2024-25 audit, our work on what's called the value for money arrangements. That will be completed with draft reports issued by November of this year. So there'll be an assessment on the council's arrangements for financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness by November. In terms of the wider perspective around financial statements, this all fits within what's called the backstop. So the backstop is MHCLG's solution to part of what's called the local audit reset and recovery process, getting local government audits back on track. Guidance was issued in June of this year, setting out broadly 2 options available for organisations that had previously disclaimed financial statements. And disclaimed means no opinion was issued, not that they were right or wrong, just no opinion was issued. Those options fall into essentially 2 risk categories, high risk and low risk. Low risk means essentially few issues, no underlying issues, no significant control issues, no frauds that have occurred. In those low risk categories, you can move into the method is called proof in total, but essentially it's a shortcut version that takes you through to a clean opinion, presuming everything works out okay, over a relatively short period. Could be done in 2 years, could be 2 years. For those that fall into the high risk category, that can take longer. The only option available there is something called historic testing, which essentially is testing the income and expenditure of all the years that haven't been audited. So when you've got more than 1 year, it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, etc. So it's volume of work that's involved in doing that, as well as completing, the year-end balance sheet. That takes place over a number of years. You can't give a time frame on that because it takes as long as it takes, if that makes sense. There's a volume of work to get through, and you have to get through that, and you can do that over a number of periods. Because of the volume of disclaimed opinions, 3 years, this is why we've determined it's prudent to say that getting back to that point by 27, 28 will be a challenge because of the volume of work. I would rather put it out there that it's to state where it might be and then do better than that, rather than come back to you and say everything will be fine. Oh, actually, no, it won't. There is a hurdle that we need to work through, and the final hurdle that we do need to work through is deploying our specialist IT auditors to interrogate the finance system to give us a piece of assurance that we need over opening balances in the balance sheet for the period in which the fraud occurred. That may, and I'm trying to be very prudent and almost pessimistic, that may change our risk assessment. That could get things better, but we need to carry out that piece of work. It's not appropriate. I couldn't tell you what the outcome of that is until we've done that piece of work. So we have to go through these steps to get there. The short upshot is that we will be disclaiming the 24-25 financial statements because we cannot complete all the work that we need to do. In the meantime, we will complete the value for money commentary work, and we will carry out this piece of work around understanding the IT environment. On the completion of those pieces of work, we can then come back to you, revisit our risk assessment, and revisit the timeline of what that actually means. Okay. I'll pause at that point, and I appreciate it's relatively complex, but I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. So from what you've explained, is that why on the risk assessment register the financial aspect is still a risk score of 9, which is quite high, I understand?
So actually, it's not my risk register. I think you might be talking about the underlying.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the corporate risk register. We'll cover that later when we go through the risk register. But the reason that risk is still high is basically because we still have a lot of efficiencies that we need to find in terms of medium financial plan, and we also have some overspends that have been occurring up to period 1. But we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. I think your risk is different, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's slightly different.
Okay. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you. Just on the subject of we're not going to get, or unlikely to get, the unqualified audit opinion. Is Gedling an outlier on that, or are the councils in the same position?
So, in terms of the pool of organisations getting, I call it disclaimed opinion in 20 is getting smaller. So it is getting smaller. So I don't have the statistics, but it will start to flow. The intention of MHCLG is to get everybody to a clean opinion over a few years, but there will be nominated exceptions to that. And in Gedling's case, the fraud is the most unusual factor in this. We have to tackle that, even though it's historic. We have to tackle that in order to issue our opinion. So there will be less organisations in this than, you will be in a smaller pot of organisations being disclaimed. Depends what you call outlier, really. You will be, I suppose, in parlance, you will be, if this is the case, Gedling will be in a small group of organisations that won't have got to that clean position.
Thank you very much. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, can you just outline when this review of the financial system will take place and determine the balances, and will that be reported to a future audit committee?
Yeah, so our IT specialists are coming up with the scope now. They believe they've got capacity to get this work done. We need to agree capacity with Tina's team. But I would hope, and I'll give myself a bit of a window, I would hope that work will be completed this calendar year, which will allow us to, which is really important for us in the format of opinion we give on the 24-25 financial statements.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you much.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions for Mark? No? Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Tina. Go on to, sorry? Right, this one, item 6, Internal Audit Progress Report 2025-2026, report of the Internal Audit Partner, which is just for noting. Yeah? The progress, okay? So nobody...
This is Max, he's presenting this.
Oh, and we've got Max Armstrong from BDO, Internal Auditor. Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is our progress report. This is the summary of our progress over the last quarter in delivering the internal audit plan. So within this report, we've got our table showing the kind of graphic of the progress, plus our 2 individual audit reports, which we're presenting to this committee. We've also got a section you'll see under the title Value Added, which is in Appendix 1 to the progress report. So this is our BDO Global Risk Landscape Report. This is a report that we as a firm put together each year. It spreads across more than just the public sector, but also into private sectors, where our risk specialist team interview and issue surveys and get intelligence from 500 global risk leaders across different industries, and really report on what those key themes, what they're seeing, what the feedback they're getting is on risk, which is pertinent to this item, but also the report we're going to be talking about later. I'm not going to go through the report in detail for the Global Risk Landscape Report, but just to probably draw out some of the key headlines. Over 2/3 of organisations that we spoke to as part of this exercise took a risk or taking a risk-averse and risk-minimising approach more generally. They're also seeing an increase in compliance risk and a more focus on compliance risk, whereas actually when you speak to executives in a lot of organisations, their viewpoint is slightly different, where they want to look at more practical risks facing their organisations. And finally, 74% of executives are saying that embedding risk thinking into their organisation's culture is a priority, which I think is a real positive actually in looking at risk in that way, rather than seeing it as a side task to do. It actually sits at the heart of what we're seeing organisations doing. I'll let you read the rest of the report at your leisure from the risk landscape, and I'll move on to our progress report. So on page 154 of your packs, that starts with the executive summary on the People Services Review. So this was a review that covered 2 key areas. 1 being sickness and absence management, and 2 being workforce development and succession planning. So those members who have been on the committee for a few years may remember we did bring a report on workforce development a few years ago, which had a limited opinion. So that was included in the scope of this review as a bit of a follow-up, but also to see the progress the council have made in that area. The overall opinion we've provided for people services in these areas of the scope is limited on the design and moderate on the effectiveness, with 1 high finding and 4 mediums. I think it's probably important to note, as is outlined in the conclusion section though, that the council are in an element of transformation around this. So what you'll see in a lot of the management responses is actually some of these areas were known as challenges and are being incorporated into service objectives, which I think is a real positive. To talk through some of the findings we've raised at a high level. So the high finding we did raise was around succession planning. And actually this is a key theme we see across many local authorities, where the council haven't identified what is considered business critical roles. That's the first step to succession planning, knowing which roles are those that are critical to the organisation. What we typically would see would be, for example, statutory roles or a role where there's only one person with the relevant qualifications to then deliver that role. In addition to that, there's some departments which haven't got standard operating procedures in place. So when someone leaves, that knowledge isn't going with them. There's written documentation to support those existing staff or new individuals coming in to be able to deliver that role effectively. The second finding relates to the documenting of one-to-one. So again, you may recall from that previous audit, one of the findings and recommendations that did come out of it was the level of appraisal completion was quite low. Again, as an organisation, you're not alone on that front across both private and public sector, but critically public sector. So the council has actually taken a strategic view to change it to monthly one-to-ones between individuals and line managers. So embedding some kind of monitoring process into that is what we've identified as a key recommendation going forward to check that ultimately those conversations are happening and they're having the impact that they're designed to. And then onto the sickness management side. So this part of the scope looked at the sickness absence management from start to end. So 1, how is it logged? 2, where sickness has been going on for an extended period and triggers are met, how are they then being escalated and managed? And 3, data and reporting back into the executives and the management team. And in our sample testing of cases, there was higher level than we would typically expect of non-compliance in relation to the return to work. So this is a key part of the process to integrate people back into their roles. Are there any other measures that need to be taken to support them as they come back into their roles? So those conversations weren't being documented and consistently being evidenced. And then finally, there was some gaps in terms of the reporting on the sickness absence in the HR dashboard report into the governance structures within the council, so typically the budget and performance board. Having said that, you'll see from the management response that actually procurement has been done for a new HR system that would involve more self-service and more immediate data to hand. Our second report, which starts on page 161 of your packs, was on risk management. So risk management is an area which I think, as an internal audit team, is important for us to cover on a semi-regular basis, ultimately to give you that level of assurance over the risk management arrangements. Again, actually, like the people services, risk management's been on quite a journey over the last few years. So the risk management strategy came to this committee a year and a half or so ago. And behind the scenes, a Pentana risk management module's also been brought in and rolled out as of last October to ultimately improve that design of controls for risk management, which is why we've given an opinion substantial on the design, but moderate on the effectiveness. And actually, the moderate probably leans into some of those teething issues that naturally come with a new system, a changing culture around risk management, and a real drive for staff to use the system and how it's designed and ensure it's been updated. So quickly to cover some of the key findings, that there were inconsistencies, which is the real theme across all 3 findings around how the system was used. So for instance, in some cases, the quarterly updates weren't regularly logged on the system, or risk assessments hadn't been complete on the system to give that initial risk score number, which then feeds into your report that you see in the corporate risk scorecard. There was a lack of narrative at times around the risk, so where risk scores had gone up, we could see it's gone from 15 to 20, but there wasn't that explanation to say why on Pentana, which really probably is the key element to drive that conversation around, well, what's caused this? Is it a change in controls? Is it just a change in regulation or legislation or the general environment that may impact that risk going up? So that narrative, I think, is key to support the oversight function from the corporate risk board. And then finally, the actual wording of some of the risks, and this covers more around the departmental risks on Pentana. The Orange Book guidance and general sort of good practice guidance for risk management is a good risk is worded in what is the cause, the event, and the consequence, of that happening in that structure. And some of the risks we identified weren't worded in that way. And I think that's probably critical in the sense that it really draws out, this is what could happen if this process is not in place to start with. So strengthening those 3 areas, I think, would be the next step, but it's part of the training and the written guidance that the management team have prepared to support staff with that. I'll pause there and invite any questions on any of the two audit reports or any elements of the progress report.
Thank you very much, Max. Councillor Hughes, yeah.
Thank you, Max. It's not so much a question as a comment on the report itself. Under finding 1 on the risk management, pages 16364, the management response seemed to be just a copy of the recommendations rather than the actual management response. So could we make sure that that's either the correct version is circulated or it's brought back to the next committee, please?
That's fine, yeah. Apologies, that is an error. We can circulate that outside the meeting, yeah.
Want to say something?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you very much. Just to focus on the people workforce report. So, I mean, obviously there are kind of issues there, Max, and I think in summary, you put in conclusion, essentially these problems will be sorted out with the upgrade of the system, digitalisation, and all the rest of it. It makes things a lot easier within the kind of workforce HR department. I suppose it is concerning what's happened in the interim, especially with regards to staff sickness levels within the council, and hopefully we've got some assurance in place for the committee that that the return to work processes are happening. So I'm very keen on staff wellbeing as well. And I suppose the second question as well is that within the council, are there other systems being looked at and being digitalised, I think make life a lot easier when it comes to digitalisation with less paperwork, etc. Is that happening as well within the other areas within the council?
Oh, right. Jen's here, so if you'd like to ask Jen.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to your first question, we have updated our sickness absence policy, which is in draft, and it's currently going through committee approval. So that's going to the ACSC in October. And once that's approved, hopefully, then that's where we'll be rolling out training to line managers in how to have difficult conversations. I think some of the issues around sickness absence management is the confidence levels of managers to approach different reasons for absence. So we're going to provide managers with that training. Hopefully that will help with their return to work interviews. We're also looking at how we can do some spot checks as well, and that's based on guidance we've received as well through the audit to ensure that the return to work interviews are done in a timely manner. And I think this works in two ways. And as you've mentioned, you're really keen on well-being. I think from a staff perspective, it's important for them that their manager is actually following up with them when they've been off sick. And there is that ongoing care and support for individuals, integrating them back into the workplace and ensuring that if there are any adjustments that need to be made, these are done in a timely manner and recorded and monitored until that person returns to good health, or indeed if there are adjustments that need to remain in place based on disabilities.
If I may, Chair, just add a comment there. Thanks for that, Jen. So yeah, I'm very keen on well-being, but also that if we don't follow these processes, there is a risk that key staff could leave, which none of us want to see. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is directed at you as well. So going forward, can we have an assurance that the council will be either employing managers who have that skill or they will receive the training when they arrive?
Yes, absolutely. So part and parcel of the transformation that we're currently undergoing in HR is to look at our policies and how easy they are for people to understand. So whilst we'll provide people with training, we are reviewing our policies on the basis that we'll provide management guidelines so that people can find it easier to absorb information and what to do next. So this is where we have started to devise flowcharts that make it easy for people to follow a process in a timely manner, but also ensuring that where there are issues with manager capability, that we're also looking at that separately in terms of the support that individual managers may need in their own development, just as a general good people manager. So there is a raft of training that we're currently undergoing at the moment in terms of identifying the skills that our managers need. So a skills analysis has been completed, and my team in HR are doing what's known as a carousel of training, which some of you may be familiar with, and that's where we're identifying those people management training sessions that our managers need to ensure that all managers attend these as a mandatory requirement. And that's basically ensuring that we set a benchmark so that we know that people are receiving the training that they need. If there are issues going forward, we'll coach managers on an individual basis. And that's where I am currently looking at the HR structure that we've currently got to allocate a HR business partner to different departments who can be there to ensure that policies are applied in the right way, but also there to coach and support managers in the use of those policies to ensure that staff are managed effectively. Ultimately, that should result in better and improved performance within the council, but also with staff feeling that they are being managed in a more supportive way as well.
Thank you very much. Any more questions for anybody?
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious how the 1 month timetable was arrived at from an annual performance development review to then go to one-to-one meetings between staff and line managers monthly. On the face of it, a month seems a really, really short time. Are managers going to be able to actually do this? How did we arrive at a month? Am I being...
Jennifer?
I thought maybe 2 months. I don't know why.
Yes, I'm happy to take that question. So in terms of good practice, when managing performance, monthly is viewed as good practice where you're having regular conversations with your staff. Now, as a council, one size doesn't fit all. No. And so this is where we've said to staff who are office-based that they'll have a monthly one-to-one. But where you have staff in leisure, for example, or also in environmental services, this is where they'll have one review every 3 months. And that's to take into account the shift patterns that people work, and to make sure that everybody is included in this process.
Thank you. That clears that up. I thought we'd setting ourselves up to fail here.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else for any questions? No. I'd just like to say thank you very much, Jennifer, for your very informative answers. Thank you, darling. And thank you to Max as well. Thank you. So item 7, we'll go on to corporate risk management review, Q1, January-June 25-26 report to the Chief Finance and Section 151 Officer, which is Fran.
Well,
yeah.
I'm presenting.
Okay, Fran's doing it. Thank you.
Yes, I'm presenting this report, but if there are any specific questions around finance risk levels, then Tina can answer those as they arise. So quite a lot of movement in the corporate risk register across Q1. And I think in some ways this reflects the improvements we've made across the risk management process. So we are much more, I suppose, live to changes within the organisation and making sure that information is captured effectively and tracked through that corporate risk register. So looking into Q1, no change across the finance risks, but as I say, Tina can update if there are any specific questions in relation to those areas. In relation to corporate risk number 2, which is capacity and service delivery, there has been an increase in Q1 in the risk level in this area. Now, the reasons are set out in the report, but predominantly the increase from 9 to 12 is around capacity within our waste services. And it's reflected in other risk areas across the corporate risk register for Q1. So we have had high levels of sickness in Q1, which again, through the review of the sickness absence management policy and training of managers, we're hoping will improve going forward in terms of managing those longer term sicknesses and ensuring effective return to work. But there has been significant sickness in Q1, which has impacted on the capacity of that service, and that has been reflected in other areas through the risk register, including an increase in complaints, which was reported to Cabinet in Q1, which has impacted on the reputational risk across the organisation. I suppose I'd like to reassure members that there are things in progress to try and address these issues. So there has been quite significant changes going on in the Waste Services Department. Also in Q1, we were feeling the impacts of a management restructure. So we had gaps in posts where some people were leaving and we hadn't yet new people into those roles hadn't yet started. So there was a bit of a capacity issue across Q1 as well. We now do have all staff in post across the new management structure, which is really positive. And I think, again, particularly on the park side as well, and it's reflected in the risk register, there's been some work undertaken in that area, which has improved risk levels across certain parts of the corporate risk register. So there are some positive things going on. We have introduced our white space system. That white space system is now live. All our crews have been trained in the operation of that system. And whilst, again, implementation of that took time and there were some issues in Q1, they're really starting to see the benefits of that system now. And our customer service staff are also starting to report that they're seeing an improvement because they can give much better advice to the customer as to where their collection's at, because they can see that data live on the round. So that is going to be improving things. So I think, there are measures in place to mitigate and reduce this risk, and I'm hoping that it will be reducing down, but we can't ignore the data and the information from Q1. In relation to the corporate risk, health and safety at work, so there has been a reduction in this risk level, which is really positive. So that has seen a reduction from 9 to 6. This is due to improved capacity. So we did have a bit of a capacity issue in the health and safety team. They're now back up to full strength. We've also, as I've mentioned, our new parks manager has been reviewing some of the risks around health and safety within that team and lowered the departmental level, which has meant that our corporate level has reduced. The environmental risk stays at the same level. We still need to complete the review of our emergency plan, and we're hoping that once that's completed, that level will reduce down. In relation to corporate risk 5, contractual partnerships, again, we've seen a decrease in the risk level in this area, which is really positive. So that has dropped from 9 to 6. And that's really due in Q1 to the kind of stabilisation of our new procurement service. So we now have an in-house procurement manager and support from Orbis Procurement as our service support partner. And we're getting some really key procurements out to the market, and performance is going well. So we're reducing the risk in that area, which is, again, really positive. And I would just like to hugely thank all those who've been involved in that procurement transformation project, because that's been a great piece of work. So moving on to risk 5, that's reputation. And again, this is what I've referenced earlier. There has been an increase in risk in this area. So that has, again, linked to performance in waste services. So it's increased from 2 to 6. We have had a higher than average level of complaints in Q1 in relation to missed bins. We've seen reports in the media. We've seen things on social media. We're well aware of the issues. We are tackling those issues, and I think it's really important to say that. But reflecting that performance, obviously, that has been an impact on the council's reputation. In relation to infrastructure assets, that still remains at a high risk level. We did have some positive work done on the dry side drainage at Carlton Forum, but there are still issues with the wet side drainage, which we're still working with the county council to improve. But the work on the dry side has been positive, and I think that engagement with county on that piece of work is going well. It's just we need to try and find a solution that works. So that risk level does stay higher. In relation to ICT, so you'll recall that risk level came down last quarter, and that has remained the same. So that's positive. The corporate risk around projects, again, a reduction in risk level, and we're really starting to make some ground now in terms of our project and portfolio management as part of our transformation programme. We now have a Jura system that can really track performance across projects. So we're able to use much more effective data, I suppose, in terms of where we are on different projects and how well they are going. As was reported to Cabinet for Q1, all actions under the annual delivery plan, all milestones for Q1 were completed, and a majority of those are linked to these key projects. So really positive from a performance point of view, and some really good work going on, particularly, I suppose, in that digital space with the rollout of our white space system, the implementation of our customer relationship management system. It might not be all, I suppose, as obvious to residents and so forth as yet, but some really key steps being taken with those projects, which is really, really positive. In relation to corporate risk 12, so this is service standards and performance management. Again, this is linked to the performance I've touched on in capacity and performance in waste services. So performance in Q1, as I've already mentioned, was highlighted as an issue, and that's increased the risk level in that area. Finally, information and data, that risk level remains the same. Again, that was one that came down, I think, in the previous quarter, but that one remains the same, so no significant change in that area. So I hope what you can see by this is, I suppose, that this risk process is much more fluid than perhaps it's been historically. So we really are tracking that information and that data through every quarter to track that risk level and performance. Thank you.
Thank you to Fran. Is there any questions for Fran? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Fran, just coming back to risk 2, and then its knock-on effects on other areas. So what you're saying is this service capacity issue only relates to waste management. There's no other department that has capacity issues.
I suppose that lots of departments have them. I suppose that pushing up the risk in this quarter has been around that waste performance, because obviously it's such a significant service. It's a key service. It's a statutory service. So the capacity impact of not delivering that service, the risk is much more severe than perhaps in some other areas. You'll recall, I don't know if it was last quarter or the one before, we had an increase in capacity because we had issues in our ICT team. And again, that one single department, because of the fundamental need to ensure that those systems are operated correctly, that increased the risk level with capacity as well, but it did come back down again. So it's up and down, but I think given I suppose the significance of the waste service and the impact, the wider impacts of not delivering, that's why it has affected the overall risk level.
Okay, thank you. If I could just follow on from that. So once we get these problems sorted out, or at least reduced, that will, through the new technology, white space, and sorting out sort of sickness, absence, and that kind of thing, you would expect not only that risk to come back down, but the other two that have gone up as well, would you think? Yeah.
Absolutely. We see them as it's such a key function, and they are all intrinsically linked. So yeah, we would hope that reduce. Whether it will reduce in Q2, I can't guarantee, but we're certainly hoping towards the end of the year. But there's further, as you can see, there's further detail in the report about some of the issues we've had around garden waste and other things which have all contributed to this. But not to be entirely negative, I would like to say that the crews are working incredibly hard to try and pick up extra rounds. We have obviously had issues when we've had to have agency in, but I think. I can't remember the exact figure. It was quoted in the performance report at Cabinet. It was around 85,000 bins a week, or something like that, being collected around the borough. So a lot is happening. It's just obviously we can't ignore that, the complaints and the issues we're having. Thanks.
Yeah, Tina just wants to say something.
I think just to add to what Fran said, and it relates to what Councillor Bestwick was talking about earlier, in terms of the finance risk, this is one of the reasons why that finance risk has stayed quite high, because we do have those significant overspends in the Environment Department, particularly around agency costs. So it does have a knock-on effect. So when there's high levels of sickness, it means we have to cover those staff with agency staff, which is a much higher cost provision. And that's, as I say, that's one of the reasons why that risk has stayed high. But also what Jen's talked about today is the introduction of that new performance management policy and absence management policy. So we should hope to see, as these things start reducing, they have a knock-on effect across a number of risks across the authority. As they are being dealt with, we should see some risks reducing over the course of the year, hopefully.
Thank you, Tina. Councillor Bestwick, you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry, just to revisit what you were saying about the waste management. I can't speak for anybody else, so it might just be because I'm in a rural ward, but I don't think I've ever had so many complaints in such a short space of time about failed bin collections. So just to reiterate it, the other thing that they were complaining about was they couldn't get an answer. So they'd phone up and the person on the end of the phone couldn't tell them when their bin was going to be collected or anything. I understand white space will help with that, and if that when that comes in, which you said it's now fully in, then that's going to be great. So I'm really pleased to hear that and the other things that we're doing. I think one thing that we could have done, if you don't mind me saying, is when we know that this was going to happen and we were going to be short of people and there might be some missed bin collections, it would have been useful to notify probably all the councillors and say we are experiencing this at the moment, so you may get some complaints. I think that would have armed us all a little bit better, and we would have been able to answer our enquiries easier and maybe even put something out on our Facebook post to just warn people and tell them what to do if the bins weren't collected. So if maybe that's something that we could bear in mind for the future if it ever happens again. And just one final point, I did speak to somebody who I won't name from the Parks team today who was still saying they're short of staff, people are on holiday, people are off sick, so the item that I wanted them to deal with will be another couple of weeks.
If I may just come back, absolutely, it's a valid point in terms of some of that comms plan around this. It's absolutely right that that's done correctly. I think what I would say as well is some of the sickness, we don't know it's coming until it happens. I think the summer period has been quite difficult because obviously people were allowed leave as well, and then when you've got people calling in sick on top of that, that just creates, a bit of a storm, and then. We've had both our director and our assistant director down dispatching crews at 5 a.m. Just to pull in cover. It has been a really challenging time. I think, we talked earlier in the year about the kind of base budget review and making sure that we had enough staff, enough posts to actually cover the rounds that we now had because that hadn't been reviewed. We have got those posts in place now. It's just keeping them filled and making sure that people come into work is where I think we're really struggling. But absolutely, your point around communication or better communication is a valid one. But I am confident that things are going to improve, and Jen's work around that sickness management and also training the managers on how to effectively carry out sickness management is going to be essential to making sure that this improves.
Yeah, you can.
Sorry, my question was in two parts. I think what we'd all love to see, and this might be for Tina, sorry, I think we'd all love to see where it says fraud, bribery and misconduct still at 9. I think we'd all like to see that come down, wouldn't we? Is there any prospect of that in the near future?
I would definitely hope so, yeah. So we're just we're actually having an internal audit as we speak. It's being undertaken at the moment around main financial systems, and that includes kind of like fraud as well. We have done a lot of work based on the initial BDO report that came out after the fraud. We've now migrated our core financial system to the cloud, so we have a supported version which we wouldn't have done if we hadn't have migrated. And part of that migration is this piece of work now where user access is being handed over to the ICT department. So rather than it be undertaken in the service area where there's users, it will be done separately. You'll recall that after the fraud, we had a bit of a manual workaround on that. This kind of like digitalises it, so it makes it a bit more robust. There is still some work that we need to do, and we've got a lot of work to do with departments to identify departmental risks of fraud. Some areas of fraud that people don't necessarily associate with fraud, like employer misconduct, in terms of falsifying timesheets over time, those kind of things. So we're doing a lot of work with departments to highlight those and bring those into the corporate risk register. And we've got that planned over the next couple of months. So yeah, a lot of work going on. I'd like to say it would get down to the yellow. I can't promise that, but I think we should definitely see that risk going down over the course of the year, obviously dependent upon the internal audit, because they'll look at the systems and they'll potentially raise some concerns. And then, as Mark has said, they'll be the external auditors will be doing a review of the financial systems as well. They might bring up some pointers, but anything that we identify, we can then deal with. So yeah, hopefully it should come down.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any questions? No? Thank you very much. To item 9. Just to remind you, cyber and compliance update's been withdrawn. And item 9 is any other item which the chair considers urgent, which I've got nothing. But I would like to say a very sincere thank you to Tina, Max, Mark, Fran, Jennifer, and everyone involved with Audit. Thank you very much. So Peter's got to go, hasn't he?